In a world full of people who are tired of bad reboots, there was one reboot that really wasn't getting the attention it deserved. Like, really guys, every time I heard all modern reboots were bad, pre-DuckTales, I kept looking at this show. TMNT 2012 is one of my favorite shows, and it's up there for my favorite reboot, behind the Looney Tunes show. So today, we're going to cover both 22-minute parts of Rise of the Turtles, but I want to say this. If you enjoy TMNT and love this block, I'll be covering the 2003 show on Patreon, so if you want to support what I'm doing, there will be an exclusive review there, just like my Feral Friends video that you saw that was made back in May. Link in the description below. So this show starts out with a ton of comic book-esque exposition shots, and like Rise of TMNT, to which I'm going to say Rise from this point on, stays true to keeping that aesthetic alive. I guess in this version of the show, considering the 3D aspect, it'd be harder for some people to see that. But I do notice the smaller things, like the eyes which seem to be drawn at times. We start with a sparring session between the two brothers, and it does show a lot about their personality. Michelangelo already appears to be the wacky comic relief one, and it definitely shows in his fighting. We also see a lot of Raphael's aggression, to which would become a focal point for him in the future. There's also quite a bit of introspection and slight overthinking from Donatello, and Leonardo would prove to be very focused, but has a lot to learn. I definitely enjoy the fact that we see that while Raphael may prove to be the best fighter, but over time we would see that there's more to being a great leader that Leonardo possesses. I also think the fighting was pretty good. For a sparring fight, I didn't expect too much, and this exceeded all of my expectations.
It is not about winning and losing.
I know, Sensei, but I won and they lost. But what's really important is that we all did our best. Good job, everyone!
I really do enjoy this variant of Splinter. He's very close to the archetype of how senseis normally are, via a Ninjago or a Shaolin Showdown. And like I said before, I think the true distinction between his character versus the others is the connection that he has with the turtles is achieved much sooner than the other masters slash senseis. I actually believe that they care for him and that he's training the turtles well. So we get to the intro, which, I mean, I wasn't a true fan of. I always found it to be too dependent on the fact that 3D animation lent itself to make certain animation a lot easier to do. I know that within this show, the camera and the composition of shots tends to be a lot more on the dull side, which is saved by the great story fight scenes and characters, but it makes it feel more like the 3D option was more of a time-saving move rather than a creative choice. I always found it to lack that certain feel that would get you pumped up for an episode, the way that Rise would. The song is fantastic though. They established pretty early on that these newly turned 15-year-old turtles have been in hiding, training for, anyway, we get to the backstory of how they came to be.
I was leaving the pet store with 4 baby turtles. I passed a strange man on the street.
Go no further. This place is a place where you are not allowed to be in this place.
That was the beginning of our life together.
It's super interesting that the Krang didn't really seem to change at all within 15 years, at least. It's also interesting to see that they show a main villain very quickly, considering the amount of Krang we see in season 1 alone. But the turtles wanting to do something other than train and eat algae and worms beg Splinter to go up to the surface, and as much as I enjoyed Splinter, like Ralph actually, they can be a little on the nose with their main personality trait. I actually found that to be quite annoying when Splinter would do certain mind games, and I suppose you could say that's the point, but I think with good writing, you can do the whole mind games aspect a lot better without annoying the audience. But before going up to the surface, they have these super weird montages of showing off their weapons. Again, it brings me back to the notion that they're taking advantage of the easier 3D atmosphere and workflow. It doesn't really make that much story sense for this scene to happen, and at most it just looks cool. If you don't have enough substance to fill 22 minutes, then simply don't go the 22 minutes. I think you can still thrive off of an 11-minute story-based cartoon. Besides that, we have them nerding out in the city until they realize they're actually pretty exposed out here. This leads into this scene here.
Pizza?
You guys won't like it.
I'll take the rest.
No way!
Back off!
I gotta say, if anything, I do enjoy the whole learning the earth scenes, not just from this show, but from others. I guess that's why I enjoy Peridot so much, within the first few episodes anyway. But it's just that innocence that would soon be ripped from them. Oh no, we reached the edge of the map. Can I just say, there's actually a lot of filler in this practically 44-minute special. Yes, I would go on to like this show later, but as a first episode, going back, yes, flaws ahoy. They see April for the first time, and this is the beginning of the Donatello-April thing. There are a few seeds here and in the eventual fight, but as nature and logic would imply here, it isn't such a smooth sailing as he'd expect. But yes, they do get into their first fight scene, and when compared to the Rise's first fight scene, this one is leaps and bounds better. I guess one can make the argument that with Rise, the show was a lot goofier and focused more on comedy, so the action was less intentionally. But to that, I would just mention that the show overall isn't that funny to warrant such a meh first fight. With this one, I loved how the Krang fought. It really shows an unnatural movement, which works for their character. Plus, with all of the mistakes that the turtles make that mess each other up, I found this first fight to be a lot more meaningful than, oh, they have no skills, GG no re. They also bring back the initial flip that was done to Leonardo, showing that even with aggression, Raphael isn't really that strong. They unfortunately aren't successful, and it actually leads into a solo battle with one of the Krang members and Michelangelo. You definitely see how goofy and wacky this Mikey is compared to the Rise variant. This whole scene is truly great though. I wanted to highlight this part because it shows how unconnected and inexperienced they all are, dealing with what later goes on to be trash enemies. The way that the lone member enters in a very fast way, contrasted against its unnerved and emotionless face. It also helps that we don't hear the Krang talk until much later in the episode. Now here comes the micro conflict, no other real way to put it, where because Mikey was introduced to what the Krang truly operate with, the other turtles don't really believe him. It's almost as if his entire personality is and was built off of not being taken seriously.
Guys, you're never gonna believe this! That dude, he had a brain in our chests!
No, Mikey, not in our chests.
You're not listening to me!
Hey guys, I fought off that last guy and a brain popped out of his chest. There's an entire dictionary of words that allow you to convey the point that you want to make. So they get scolded for essentially failing to help a situation they weren't even involved with to begin, and Splinter essentially wants to keep them in for another year rather than helping out the girl. In hindsight, the way Splinter essentially seems to dismiss the danger April was in just because his own sons came home safe really goes against his character and his morals, but it made sense as a father, as many parents in general focus on their own child.
Another year? Has everybody forgotten that people were kidnapped? They don't have a year. Sensei, we have to do something
boners,
now.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Boners. Oh, sorry. Don't mind me. Continue.
You weren't there, Sensei. You didn't see the way that girl looked into my eyes.
This inference via sound effects truly speaks to how well the story of TMNT 2012 came out. This backstory comes back multiple times, later in this two-part series actually, in flashback mode, but it actually is shown later in the show. It also speaks to where they put the starting point, because, and I guess I should explain how this Splinter is superior, it has nothing to do with the fact that Rise's Splinter is snarkier, or that he isn't the stereotypical portrayal of a sensei. It has to do with the fact that as a main character, this version of Splinter made an impact despite his limited screen time. With that version, the Rise version, basically coming across as disconnected. Let's say you wanted to build up a story that Splinter in Rise is going to be very distant until he makes the switch. Maybe put in more scenes that show this, rather than this one scene where he can essentially be replaced with a sleeping night guard and make the same impact. Nothing in that episode showed me what distinguishes Splinter from any background character, whereas here, you know who Splinter is, leaving the episode. Now here, Leonardo is the leader opposed to Raphael, who takes it very hard in this episode. However, it should be noted that in the first season, while Raph may have the most power, his lack of tactfulness would truly get others into trouble, and they actually have an episode going deeper into that. That's why so far, Leo would make the best leader. Donatello so far only cares about science and women, which I guess if you were gonna pick two things to think about and fight for, there's plenty of worse pairs out there, I suppose. So their first plan is to meet up with this guy who has a connection connection to the problem, and it leads into this chase scene. I guess if you wanted to make this look really cool, why not address the elephant in the room? And no, I'm not gonna do the same joke again. That was a one-time thing. But they're in New York, and it seems like a very empty night for the big city. Why not, instead of going for the don't think about it route, to actually have the turtles make their way over to the escaping car while also trying not to be seen? Maybe have one go under a window, or hide under a plant on the windowsill, or be seen by a kid who thinks it's really cool. I think it would add personality to what is a cut and dry, straightforward chase. A still comedic moment here, and then...
Mom?
Yes, this is part 1 to a 2-parter episode. I honestly didn't know that going into this turtle block, and I guess I could have split the videos up, but I should just go through with it. Those who like the turtles now would like to see that part anyway. Well, I guess to break up these parts, just know that I love you all with my big panda heart. And also, how do you guys feel about these blocked group videos? If you haven't noticed, I focused on grouping videos that talk about a similar series together, like my Teen Titans / Teen Titans Go block, my Invader Zim block, and my SpongeBob block. This one is actually going to be the last block I do until maybe next month, I don't know. But if I see a lot of support, I'll make sure to keep it in mind when thinking about video topics. So the next episode starts off with the turtles getting their very first glimpse at the mutagen. This chemical, or whatever, is a very important part of the show, and it comes back multiple times. In fact, in this case, mutagen is actually applied to someone. They end up interrogating this guy, but not before this.
Well, if there's no such thing as alien robots, how do you explain this? Okay, he's in the clear. But those other guys were totally alien robots.
I guess the only reason I'm not fond of this ongoing Krang situation narrative is because of the payoff, which I'll get to later. They end up taking the guy, Snake, while they scope out the place. Apparently something involving research, taking top scientists from all over this city, leads into this place. Too bad we don't see much of it because Mikey messes up again.
Boy, I could sure go for some of that pizza right now, huh?
Where's Snake?
Oh, jeez.
I have to say, repeatedly putting Mikey in a position of comic relief is one of the things from the show I remember tuning out. It's probably why I connected so much with Leonardo and Raphael initially, because they're depicted as being the A-team. They have arcs and actual tangible things branched off from their core personality. Now, I know what you're gonna say, but Jay, I remember you saying the reason you thought Splinter and Rise didn't come across well was due to the fact that we don't have many scenes telling you who he is. And here in the 2012 version, they're doing just that with Mikey, so what's the difference? First of all, I love when people quote things from my videos because I'm very arrogant, but 2, there actually is a distinct difference. Whereas with Rise of the TMNT Splinter, we didn't get enough to discern his personality, here...
I'm here, I'm there. I could be anywhere.
I was leaving the pet store with 4 baby turtles.
That was us.
Yes, don't interrupt.
A hand made out of light. Now it's an eye made out of light. In the hand again. Now the eye's back. What? Are you talking your pet turtle? That's adorable.
Oh, I'm gonna crush you.
I think you got the point incredibly early, and it's not like we see much of anything else. I know of these 4 turtles, in the grand scheme of selling toys, don't really matter that much to anyone except the fans, but to have Michelangelo essentially be your Sheen, your Teen Titans Go era Beast Boy, you're nothing but a comic relief, it's really disheartening. Comedic moments aside, this chase scene was actually pretty underwhelming. There wasn't a single part that stood out to praise, so meh. So we actually have a better depiction of what happened the day Splinter lost his loved ones. I definitely think this limited animation served well as a break from the norm, and mind you, limited animation has its uses, it just should never be a crutch. It also shows Splinter's vulnerability and empathy for his sons, to which Leo really understands so far. It also leads into the first true scene of April and her wuss of a father. They try to plan out an escape, which even with their plan, taking down one Krang wouldn't really do too much.
Pain is unbearable!
I do appreciate the effort here from April though. Her father is just defeated. You can tell who wore the pants in that relationship.
Krang, Are those who are coming to this place coming to this place? I will inquire of Krang about that knowledge. Do you have the knowledge if those coming to this place are near this place, Krang?
Talking about the Krang themselves would be so cool. The way they talk brings so much character to them, especially because they're all named Krang. Originally, when I was going to talk about this camera view, I was going to criticize it for being a pretty bland and stale choice. But then it dawned on me, like with the other video, these weeds actually symbolize much more than I initially thought, because when this van comes out of nowhere, crashes, and the mutagen flies out onto Snake, those weeds indicate what he's going to turn into, which is this weed monster. Now I'm going to separate the next few scenes into what I like and don't like, because it does one thing that is starting to get really annoying, and the rest is completely fine, I guess. Now, I enjoy the layer of the Krang. It definitely feels sci-fi and streamlined. Bland, non-disguised Krang look aside, the fight scenes are actually pretty alright. I found them to be of your average fight scenes that get the job done. I also found Donatello at his peak here though. The scene of him climbing and being so disappointed that he actually hits himself with his own brass turtle knuckle. The scene of him getting into metallurgy, and this gem right here.
I think those are power conduits.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing, Donnie.
The conduits are all converging that way, which means that whatever is going on in that direction is important.
It definitely sets him aside as someone who isn't afraid to stand up for himself when it gets serious anyway, and he can also be funny when he isn't being the geeky guy. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have the guy who has been ultra wacky and still is ultra wacky.
See? It's a brain thing. I told you. But did any of you believe me? No! Because you all think I'm just some kind of bonehead.
Mikey!
I understand that he wanted comeuppance, but this doesn't really tell me anything more than what I already know. It just solidifies Mikey as going to be that kind of idiot, where he's only going to make matters worse. The only reason why people tend to have a problem with these characters is because their redeeming quality is being funny, and it boils them down to being a tool and not necessarily a character. For someone who's a one-off character, that's fine. It doesn't really matter in that particular case, but for the main turtle, it could come across annoying. And let me just say this for the timestamp. I may have bashed Michelangelo a lot, but I do enjoy his character in other episodes. It's just in this first episode of the series, they really went comedy first and nothing second for him. I understand he was supposed to have this arc center around this brain and chest conspiracy, but the issue there is that it led to nothing. With Raphael, his aggression led to seeing that although being the strongest, he wouldn't be a good leader. With Leonardo, his ambition to being a leader led to unforeseen obstacles that built his character. With Donatello, his passion for science and innocence to the outside world built a connection with April. With Mikey, his drive to prove that these brains are monsters that live inside of the alien robots only proved that he is Mikey, the comic relief. And it's okay to be funny a lot, but I think Mikey could have gone farther within this episode than just funny. They meet up with April. Raphael shell blocks Donnie, ruining his moment to impress April after Leo bumped them and Mikey hit him with his nunchuck. I'm watching. We get this scene here.
That'll hold him.
You are seriously twisted.
I guess I'm twisted too, because I would have never thought anything of it. It's not like a natural arm where once ripped off, they're bleeding profusely and ripping it off is incredibly hard. It's a robot arm, so provided robots don't feel pain, that shouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but considering Mikey sliced a Krang's face, and based off of their character animation they felt it, it just feels like bad design on their part. They meet up with the now mutated Snake, and his character design is so cool. The jagged and uneven lines and shapes that make up his body give him a very exaggerated and rough look, adding to that sense of danger. Now, one thing I noticed in this 2012 version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is that the fights always seem to have a few moments where things are just happening just to happen, with no real reason or no real drive or motivation around it. Like there's this shot of all the turtles fighting and then it goes into a crucial moment where if you actually cut out the first filler part of them fighting, the story would actually make even more sense. In this one, it's the dragged out reaction scenes like Raph here where he wipes that stuff off, despite having weapons, mind you, or when Donatello and April have this extended look at explosions. I mean, think about this shot logically. They're looking at the explosions, where the ones that call themselves the turtles are. Sorry, I had to get a little Krang there. So aren't the turtles running towards Donatello and April, running in their direction? So wouldn't they have the cue early on to run with them, and not only ran when the audience understood what was going on? Little moments like this where it pads out the episode really bring down the show so unnecessarily. Cute moment with Donatello, April plans to fight whoever took her father, and we get this moment with Sensei, where he says he could have picked anyone anyone except Mikey because he's the comic relief. I still think in this context, Leah was the best. In Rise, any of them could have been a leader and it would have been reasonably the same episode, which again, they take the focus off of the turtles and put it back into the action. Whereas here, as you saw, it was more about the turtles and less about the action. Hence why they talk more than they do things. They get caught on the news in Tokyo, Japan, and we see Shredder. These scenes that focus on him is great. They really capture that intensity that he will have a lot later on in the show. Unlike Rise, we actually see the main antagonist quite early. But it ends with him making a trip to New York to finish what he started, leading into the great story. And that was Rise of the Turtles from TMNT 2012. So if you enjoyed this long review and the Rise review and you want to see my 2003 review, you can join my Patreon and see it there. The 2003 one. I really want to be clear with that. Just the 2003 one and whatever the patrons vote on next. Anyway, special thanks to the patrons of October, and please let me know what you guys think of these blocks where I talk about one series or one topic over multiple videos. As always though, take care. Alpha out.